Good morning, everybody. Oh, you fucking honker. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. This is Zero Hour. I'm No One. This is episode 25. And the name of the episode is Thank You, Donald. Good riddance, or something like that. Uh, you know why I'm saying thank you? It's not because of any of his lame shit about orderly transition while continuing to incite and going insane in the fucking White House. Sorry, in the freaking White House. It's not the White House's fault that he's in it, you know. Um, the reason why I'm saying thank you is that over the last 4 years, Donald has exposed. I mean, in episode 24, I talked about when I first learned about him. That was in 2001 when I was in New York City for the first time, and the person we were visiting said that his father gave him one city block's worth of wealth, to sort of say what he had inherited, and what we now know was disinherited from Mary Trump, Donald's niece. I'm not going to use um, the last name for Donald because I think that Mary, Baron, uh, I don't know, Baron, I can't even, I mean, as many people as possible who carry that name are shielded from the hatred Donald and definitely, we're going to talk about just him for that moment because this is sort of a wake, but this is also a warning. A small, quick side story. For the past 5 years, my girl puppy, she's not a puppy anymore, she's like 100 pounds, has been trying to claw her way out through the tiles and the closet to make more room for her fat ass. But it doesn't move. And she hasn't realized it in 5.5 years. But she knows when not to listen to me and exactly when to wake me up and every other thing. And if you have peanuts in your hands, she'll do anything for you, including trying and molest her lover, who they have never consummated because the lover is a dud. Um, anyway, you need levity in a funeral. Uh, and so, Donald, goodbye. And thank you for exposing for us our deepest inadequacies, the cracks in our foundations, the hidden opportunistic infections. None of it would have really meant anything had you not focused on it so much for your selfishness, to expose the futility and the nihilism that is inherent in selfishness. Because at the end of it, you end up eating yourself. And that's, you got to write and let us know how that is. So we're going to deal with all of them. Don't worry. We're going to deal with all these issues. And we're going to take them one by one. We're going to handle them and we're going to fix them and we're going to make it better. We're going to fix the foundations and we're going to break the fog of this tyranny that you and people like you have been bringing on people all over the world for thousands of years. You're not new. There's nothing new about you, And just like the great Representative Clyburn said, I think on Mehdi Hassan's show, that he'll be the first sitting president of the United States to be impeached twice. So finally, he gets to be first at something. He's also the biggest and the most successful con man to have failed But I want you to be warned that if we censure him, and then the rest of it is left murky in the courts, and then there's litigation on and on and on, and then he dies, it dies with him. And if you censure him, then you are just cutting off the head of the Hydra. It's like taking down bin Laden didn't kill Al Qaeda, it created ISIS. So, and then ISIS sort of spread out, and now it's sort of a global concern. But it is ideology based, and never ever let anybody tell you that there's no power in words. And if you really want an acute example, then you just look at the last 24 hours on, if no other social platform, just Twitter and then Parler, and you'll see like what they're, how up in arms they are about being blocked, about Donald being shut down, about all these people getting shut down, because what Donald did was brought out the deep-rooted, hidden hate of the Confederacy, of prejudice, of white supremacy that our country has been battling from the very beginning of its inception. And mind you, the founding fathers knew this was around. And the founding fathers knew that to be an egalitarian society, they couldn't just deny these people the right to be citizens and kick them out and take their land. No, because that would be unwise in the long term. So what they did was they wrote down that all men are created equal. Why did they say just all men? And why did they not just say white men? Because if you were to think that white supremacy was prevalent and that Jefferson and Washington, who owned slaves, were, purely bad people and didn't understand this, I don't know if that is true. Washington wasn't very intellectual. I think it's Adams and John and Quincy Adams and Jefferson and Franklin and all these people. No, because they knew that there would come a time, and that is exactly how our Constitution is drafted. Read it like you would read a Bible, except I wish they would have made it more reader friendly. And if one of the great lawyers of today would make it more reader friendly, because it's the most newest and the grandest of faiths, democracy, and it has to be kept alive, because its foundations are in people having faith in themselves. So, la-di-la-di-la, what I wanted to say is, if you want to get rid of it, education is critical and information is critical. But the vehement and aggressive censoring of verified disinformation, which can only happen if there is all that much more verified information, we need to be able to bring it down. And the education, and to be able to educate the people. If you will, and it's not the people's fault if for generations an area is drained of its education budget, and then 25 years later, people blame why that area turned Republican. Because since the Jim Crow and the neo-McCarthy era restarted, which was with the election of Ronald Reagan, all of these things became inundated in the laws, like the war on drugs. Reasonable suspicion became sort of like the premise for the stop and frisk, and And the way that the court interpreted it, which there's also another story, a tangent from this about the stacking of the federal courts. And the wisest way is to be less litigious, to be able to stop saying, oh, I'm just going to sue you for everything on earth. Or even the justice system and the criminal justice system say that all crimes, like even these traffic crimes for which people can't, or somebody who I believe was the city of Chicago falsely imprisoned me in 2013 for 14 days because I didn't have the money to pay for a charge that I felt wasn't true, and it was immediately dismissed. And the only reason I was there was because I couldn't pay the $125 at the time. And that's a story. That's a story. I still have the notes from that day, those 2 weeks. I came out and I wrote on a piece of paper, on a pad, on a legal pad. And I'll read that one day. And, you know, man, this shit is getting heavy, but it has to be done. So we have to, we can't cut up the head of the Hydra. We have to be able to turn it to stone. We have to be able to damp it down. We have to make he into it and deal with it. We give him the due process of the law. We give him the pleasures of being a reasonable human being by the presumption of innocence, which our Constitution guarantees. But other than that, we use every lever of our education apparatus, of our public education system, of our internet digital connectivity, and using the internet, using and securing the digital apparatus, creating renewable environments that are grid independent, not necessarily grid off-grid or grid-free, but can survive if need be without the grid going off and not being able to come on at notice during wintertime, during summertime, during heat waves, during snowstorms. People have experienced this. So, I'm going from where to where, but you have to understand that you have to be able to get into telling the people the truth. Because I still, to this day, even now, what's happening, I still believe that that man who was telling me that story in West Virginia, I think it's in one of my previous episodes, I don't remember which one. It wasn't because he hated me, but because it was a story and my skin color reminded him of that one story as being the only interaction he ever had with somebody of a different colored skin. And the inundation of stereotype was so clear that this man was talking about his amazing new big TV. And I'm not making this up. And the new cell phone, not the cell phone, the cell phones hadn't really come out at the time. I mean, the StarTech was the biggest thing, and his house was probably, his mobile part of that compound that we were repairing was probably at the time worth more than a StarTech would. So, but his, the cordless phone that had 2 cordless phones, they got a deal and all of that, and this great place, Walmart, I don't know what department store it was. I think it was Walmart was there at the time. I think there was a Walmart somewhere in the 30 miles, but it wasn't in their town. And so and then faith. Yeah. And then there was faith. There was a lot of Jesus talk because we were a United Methodist Church going there. And It's not God's fault we fucked up. It's not Christ who tells us to lie. I mean, come on, right? What would Jesus do, people? All you Christians? Would Jesus attack the temple on Epiphany, the day he was baptized? The temple he set up, not the Jewish temple that he went after, or that was being controlled by the Roman factions, the Roman oppressors who were there at the time in Judea. So I think it was Judea. Not a scholar, I'm no one. So it has to be done through a way where he is criminally held liable. I don't think resigning should be an option, because if he resigns, and I think for this reason, the impeachment should happen within one day. It would just go, done. One session, done, no debate, nothing, vote. Done. I think that's what's happening. I think we're going to be loving it. And they're not going to get a chance to get the charges and pardon, because they're not going to know what the charges are. They're coming out and saying this will be the charge and that'll be the charge, and insurrection and incitement. There are other charges that are not being mentioned. So even if he pardons himself for that crime, they don't know. You don't know what. And I think it can, just like that, it'll happen, because it is a democratically controlled house, and there are Republican conservatives, not Republicans. The Republican Party is dead. By the way, because this is a goodbye for Donald, which was like the boil on top of what's been boiling inside of the GOP for so long. The GOP is kind of like the neck, the fedaddling neck of the Hydra, right? So you're gonna have to like cauterize it. So the GOP is dead. Yeah. The conservatives who are standing up for the truth in the Constitution, like Senator Romney, and the people in the Lincoln Project, the generals, I mean, all of the people who are former Republicans who today stand and feel that they are left alone, you're welcome, man. And not to be a Democrat, and you didn't have to be welcomed. You're an American. Come on. Don't feel left out. Feel more included, because there's more of us. So there's a Tea Party now. So there's another part of that warning for you. And this warning peeked its head out of nowhere in 2008. I was driving my partner at the time for him to fly out for a conference. And he's a brilliant scientist who's now part of the University of California education system, university system. So, and we were driving, and this was when John McCain picked Sarah Palin to be the vice president. And we both of us in unison said, who? She was the governor of Alaska, and I don't think John McCain knew this at the time. And I think John McCain's strategists and the GOP knew this. Or some parts of the power paradigm of the GOP that moved the propaganda lever of white supremacy, that lever. And they keep people in the most critical of places, Not all of them are. That's not how it works. That's not how a conspiracy works. That's not how anything works. That's not how a pyramid scheme works. That's not how a racket works. So Sarah Palin is the prettiest face of the neo-Jim Crow era. That was the second phase of it, was what we experienced on January 6, 2021. And mind you, if we censure him, if Congress just censures him, you can and censure. But if you just censure, then what will happen is that the ideology will be covered up by the fancy fare of his drama. Unless laws are passed that we can go back to having, the truth being told on the airwaves. And I know very little about this, and I just learned about it, that Reagan had done away with some fairness thing in the media. And I was too young for that. He did that shit and ignored AIDS and did a lot of shit. Not a good. It was the first veneer politician, as I would say. And Nixon was a far better president. The EPA, right? He was going in the right direction. He hadn't been bought out by the supremacist agenda. But after Nixon, the GOP figured out that they didn't have anything left. They just didn't. So they had to go. They had to go with the religiosity. They had to. Do you see the generational difference? Like, you wonder, like, how come, like, there's this gap of people. And I'm just speculating this, the woman who was shot at the Capitol on the 6th, she was a veteran. And when her grandfather was faced about it, he said she was fascinated with Trump. I don't know why. And that's troubling to me. But the only way that can happen is through inundation. And the military is a very sort of rank-oriented establishment. And any people in the military can correct me if I'm wrong. Your superior officer is next to God. They are next to God for you. So the president, and if there are parts of his ideology that you, from your unaddressed PTSD due to being a veteran of war, haven't been able to deal with, has stemmed some prejudices that are reinforced into fears, your mind is automatically militarized. Just like Representative Crow, who is a veteran and a ranger in the and now a representative. His first name, it's not Jim, I don't think. I don't know if it is, but it's Representative Crow. Now, not the Jim Crow, that's neo-fascist Jim Crow that started with Reagan that we're talking about. Right. So, and a lot of this is very observational for me, because I've followed this since 2008 actively. And then I've also gone back and done some research on it in the past and watched videos and interviews to see, and also to be able to see what the real effect of this sort of rotting carcass of the GOP has done to the United States, which had to partner with white supremacy and go into religiosity and the blasphemization of faith and American family values while being homophobic and cruel and unusual to children and incarcerating people for, and I don't need to say anything else. The world saw the disparity that happened between the protests that happened with the Black Lives Matter and the insurrection that happened at the Capitol on January 6th. They're two different things. And the inverse response from law enforcement. And the reason why Donald didn't want the National Guard of Maryland to come in is because the National Guard of Maryland is under the control of the governor of Maryland. If he allows them in, he's not the immediate commander-in-chief in a seditious conspiracy plot where he's the antagonist. And even he doesn't think he can pull that off. So then Sarah Palin, if he's just censured, Sarah Palin and him, and even now Sean Hannity, and even now Rudy Giuliani, and now it's 5:30 or 5 in the morning in New York and Washington D.C. Even now they're going around peddling a seditious conspiracy plot in public and in private on Parlay. It's Parlay, girl. I know it's Parlay. And I know a little bit about the history of the language of Parlay. So you have to watch out for that. We need to impeach him at lightning speed and then leave it completely to the Senate. We know we have 48 or 47. I don't know how many we have right now. Not the one starting on January 20th. And then every single one of the Republican senators who vote against removal, they will have cause for being investigated under the seditious conspiracy plot. Because that's really how big it is. And that's how deep we have to go to root it out. Not saying they all have to be expelled, but they all have to be investigated. As to why they're saying no to the removal of a sitting United States president who incited and invited and goaded and then witnessed through Shamiana in the corner with his troop of seditionists and seditious traitors as Congress was being desecrated. And our representatives had real fear for their lives when Representative Crow said, I had a pen in my pocket and I was thinking of how we were going to get our way out. I'm paraphrasing. And Maxine Waters believes, as she said on Roland Martin, that she believes she would have been killed because she has received credible death threats from extremist groups who were present at the Capitol on the 6th of January. And now there's near real-time videos coming out. Not near real-time, but videos that's happened in the last, it's an hour, 2 hours, where people are, I mean, it's so, man, it's fucked up. So it has to be so there's the education part of it, but then there's also the rule of law part of it. And I'm so happy to see that Merrick Garland is going to be the DOJ chief, the Attorney General, because Merrick Garland is beyond reproach. You have to understand that this man was nominated by Barack Obama to be a Supreme Court justice. And the Supreme Court justices are never considered really and publicly announced without bipartisan discussion. It never happens. It's not possible. The leadership of both parties were aware of this. And Mitch was also aware that if he allowed Merrick Garland to get on, then the balance of the court wouldn't remain strong enough that the white supremacists, therefore the current GOP funding, would not support them. So, because by now, in the last, since Reagan to now, they have already sequestered and gerrymandered these areas to become deeply red through lack of education, lack of resources, and the inundation and brainwashing. And Fox had a very, very critical role to play in it. Rupert Murdoch had a very critical role to play in it. You know, anybody who criticizes people like Jack Dorsey And even at this point, to this level, we know that Mark Zuckerberg is an American and is loyal to his constitution, and every other media platform and Google. And everybody has come out. The levers of power on from the private individual to the governmental apparatus top. Not the current one. The current one's, the current government is it's incapacitated. It's like its neck is broken. The medulla oblong. No, not the medulla oblong. Anyway, the neck is broken, and they're paralyzed from somewhere down or somewhere up. I don't know. Doesn't make a difference. He's something. He's it. So we have to be able to take Merrick Garland's Justice Department, and Merrick Garland is beyond reproach for that reason I mentioned, and also he has been the chief judge of the DC Circuit, of the Federal Circuit, which is one of the most powerful circuits and the most respected circuits of all of the federal circuits. There are, I think, 13? I don't know. 12? It's been a while, okay? It's not like it's a constitution to remember how many circuits there are. So he also happened, and I'm not sure this is verified, I just flashed through it, through credible news, but you have to go look it up. I invite you to look up everything that I'm saying. He was also the chief prosecutor for the Tim McVeigh case, I think. Let me look at it. Merrick Garland was. So we're going to have to let Merrick Garland take that charge and lead that charge. And we need to be active on social media in helping authorities like the FBI and any other governmental authority, primarily the FBI, though. The FBI is the primary law enforcement organization of the United States. So you can follow them on Twitter. There are many of them, accounts, the verified accounts, follow them. So we need to do it this two-pronged, because we have to get rid of the brainwashing. We have to dig it out and root it out. We have to expose the white supremacy that has woven and turned the rotting carcass of the GOP that died with Nixon into just expose it. And so we now know how to go about it. And the easiest, quickest way to come to that revelation is to lightning fast impeach within like an hour. He won't have time to resign because they won't know the full charges. Maybe for one charge, maybe for two, not for 25 or 30. Not all of it leaks. And usually the one thing that doesn't is the one that catches. So then you put it to the Senate, because in the House we're going to know who they are. Then we're going to have to know in the Senate who they are, and then we're going to have to look at the money behind that, and then we're going to have to go and expose that truth, and we're going to have to hold those people accountable, and then we're going to have to educate everybody about what happened acutely on January 6, 2021, and also what has happened in the United States for the past 400 years, since imperialists snuck in and supremacists snuck in. White supremacy is old, man. It's old. It's not just in America. It's old. Go to my ethnography, 2 episodes on ethnography to figure that out. And it used the power paradigm of brainwashing and inundation and faith manipulation to continue the legacy of oppression in one way, shape, or form. And I think President Carter's time, I don't think the Democratic Party at the time had it within them to understand that psychology, that the Republicans were so desperate for power and wanted it so quickly and were so hungry for influence and money and power that they would betray their country and constitution and sell the soul, or lease the soul of America to white supremacy for the sake of veneer politics that Reagan started. So be aware of this. This is the obituary of Donald. And I want to finish this by reading a piece that I wrote that's on my site. He becomes it. Yeah. And it's very short. Just give me a moment. God damn it, where is it? No. Okay. And I invite all critiques and hatred. I love hate. Hate gives me the steps I need. He becomes it. It empowered hate. But hate hates that it always fails to get anywhere near victory over love. No matter how much it empowers, only itself it cowers at the feet of mercy. Hate begets hate, like fire begets fire. Then it dies when embers fly. It kills itself on its own pyre. But love is the burning bush, lit to the top, yet untouched by fire. Higher and higher, the inside fire that does not tire. For a resolute rebuilding, dispassionate desire. The purest love is forever unburned. So, if I can find you, that was it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll come back in a little while and do the third episode of this marathon. I love y'all. As you can see, my demons are awake. They're actually my angels. But if I say angels, they're going to come here and start being all cuddly, and I don't want to deal with them right now. I deal with them all day. I smell like them. The street dogs all over Calcutta get really stunned that a dog's walking by who looks like a man. They don't know what to do with me. Take care.